Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, based on which location you've joined the session. My name is Zubair, and we're here to understand the essential skills for conducting business continuity audits, that's ISO 22301 audits, in light of ISO 19011 Auditing Principles. So let's quickly start off. As I mentioned, my name is Zubair. I'm a senior consultant at Continuity and Resilience. We like to call ourselves as CORE. Prior to joining CORE, I was with Firstsource Solutions as a global business manager, business continuity manager for Firstsource. I used to also manage ITSM and IT continuity. I am CBCI from BCI. I've also done my business continuity specialist certification. I'm ISO 22301 lead auditor and ISO 27001 lead auditor. Quick introduction to continuity and resilience. Like I mentioned, we like to call ourselves as CORE. We are ISO 22301 certified management consulting firm. That is, we ourselves are ISO 22301 certified organization. And we deal in domains such as business continuity management, crisis management, IT disaster recovery, green IT and sustainability. We consult, train, assess, and certify individuals and the organization on these domains. We also provide crisis notification tools, BCMS tools, ITDR tools, and WAR sites, that's alternate work area recovery seats. So let's start off with today's topic. But before we get into the topic, I just wanted to give a brief of ISO 22301, because if you are auditing on a particular standard, you should be well aware of the standards. So a quick overview of ISO 22301 from PDCA cycle perspective. So we have stakeholders and interested parties who will provide us the requirements, BCM requirements, and their expectations to us. That input is taken and processed in terms of planning, that is establishing, in terms of doing, that is implementing and operating, in terms of checking, that is monitoring and reviewing, and in terms of acting, which is maintaining and improving. When this is processed, what we get is managed business continuity services. Yeah, and when this is continually improved, we get business continuity management system, which we get a management system, which is called a business continuity management system for ISO 22301. A quick overview again in terms of the clauses. We have the first three clauses of ISO 22301, which are non-operative clauses, non-actionable clauses, and then the remaining clauses are the actionable ones. So under plan, we have clause 4, 5, 6, and 7, which is context of organization, leadership, planning, and support, which comes under planning. Under 2, we have clause 8, which is operation. Under check, we have clause 9, which is performance evaluation. And under act, we have clause 10, which is improvement. Just a brief of these clauses. Clause 1, 2, 3, as I mentioned, are non-actionable clauses. And clause 4, 5, 6, and 7 is plan, 8 is do, 9 is check, and 10 is act. Which clause of ISO 22301 most closely refers to the audits? So can I request Geeta, my colleague, to open poll number 1. Yeah. So the poll is open. Which clause of ISO 22301 most closely refers to the audits? Is it clause 4, 5, 6, or 7, or clause 8, or clause 9, or clause 10? You would need to select any of these. Well, we've got the results, and apparently we've got majority who was saying clause 4, 5, 6, and 7. Unfortunately, no. That is the planning clause, like I mentioned. Your audit clause will be your clause 9, which is when you do a check. A check part will be where you will be doing your audits. So the right answer is clause 9. So whoever's got that correct, as clause 9 have got the right answer. Please remember, like I mentioned earlier, the reason why we have this poll is so that you are aware or you realize that it is important for you to know your standards before you go for your audits. So to be a good auditor, you need to know your standards at the back of your head. Yeah. So let's move on. Let's see the clauses of 19,011. Please remember that these are not certifiable standards. This is not a certifiable standard. So you don't need to remember it at the back of your hand like you need to remember the ISO 22301. But these are just guidelines. So you need to remember the guidelines. You can probably refer to it whenever you require. So these are the guidelines what we have, ISO 19011 clauses. We have scope, normative reference, and terms and conditions, which is same as ISO 22301. Then we have clause 4, which is principle of auditing. We have clause 5, which is managing an audit program. We have clause 6, which is performing an audit, and clause 7, which talks about competence and evaluation of the auditor. So we will look at these in detail, the clause 4, 5, 6, and 7 in detail in terms of what is the guidelines of 19,011 talk about in terms of what are the principles of auditing, what should be the competency of the auditor, how can we manage an audit, how to perform an audit, etc., etc. So let's start off. But before we go there, we will probably talk about the terms and conditions, some of the terms which we come across during our audit period. So first of all, what is an audit? An audit is systematic, independent, and documented process for obtaining audit evidence and evaluating it objectively to determine the extent to which the audit criteria are fulfilled. So here your audit criteria is ISO 22301. So you would probably do a systematic and independent and documented process of evaluating or checking your evidences objectively to determine if the auditee is complying to the audit criteria. So what are the types of audits? Based on parties involved, there is first party audit, which is generally an internal audit. There is a second party audit, which is done by the external team, like your customers, your suppliers, or potential suppliers. And a third party audit is nothing but your customers, your suppliers, or potential suppliers will ask an independent party to perform an audit on you. So that would be considered as a third party audit. And based on objectives and method, there are about two types of audits. One is called as document review, which is to review the documents and see if they are in compliance with the requirements. And the other one is called as surveillance audits. This is to check if the system continues to meet the requirement. So if any of you are certified as ISO 22301 organization, then you would probably notice that the first time a certifying body will perform an audit, a certification audit, and then this certification would probably be valid for about 3 years or so. However, they would continue to check you on a regular basis, maybe on an annual basis, and this check, which happens on an annual basis, is called as surveillance audit. So with that, let's move on to different stages of audits. What are the different stages of audits? We have planning stage, which is where you do your pre-audit management, your document review, and detailed planning on the on-site audit. How would you do the on-site audit? And then you have implementation stage, which is when you would actually perform an on-site audit. And then there is reporting and follow-up, which is a stage where you would provide the report and you would follow up on closures of the non-conformities you have identified. Yeah. So let's move on with some more terms and definitions. What is an audit evidence? An audit evidence is nothing but records, statement of facts, or other information which are relevant to the audit criteria and are verifiable. So note that audit evidence can be qualitative or it can be quantitative as well. Okay, what is an audit criteria? A set of policies, procedures, or requirements used as a reference against which audit evidence is compared. So here, your audit criteria is ISO 22301. So if you're performing an information security audit, then your audit criteria is ISO 27001. If you're performing an ITSM audit, then you would probably have your audit criteria as ISO 20000, so on and so forth. What is an audit program? Audit program is arrangements for a set of one or more audits planned for a specific time frame and directed towards a specific purpose. So if there are multiple places where an audit is supposed to be performed, the entire gamut, you would probably prepare an audit program to ensure that you cover all the aspects, all the locations under the audit program, and that plan is called as an audit program. Audit scope. What is an audit scope? Audit scope is the extent and the boundaries of an audit. Note the audit scope generally includes a description of physical location, organizational units, activities, and processes, as well as the time period covered. What is an audit plan? Description of an activity and arrangements of an audit. So basically, a plan you would put in place to mention that these are the activities which will be performed at this particular time, and these are the owners who you will interact, so on and so forth. What is an audit finding? Results of the evaluation of the collected audit evidence against the audit criteria. So you have an audit criteria. Based on the audit criteria, you want to check if they are compliant to the audit criteria. And when you're doing the check, when you're checking the evidences, then you will come to know, you'll identify you'll have some kind of observation. So that would be probably a conformance or a non-conforming. So that is called as audit finding. Audit finding indicates conformity or non-conformity. Audit findings can lead to identification of opportunities for improvement or recording good practices. So an audit finding may not always be a non-conformity or something which is not right. It can also mention that this is a positive thing the company is doing and we need to continue doing that. If audit criteria are selected from legal or other requirements, then the audit finding is termed as compliance or non-compliance. What is an audit conclusion? Outcome of an audit provided by the audit team after consideration of the audit objectives and all audit findings. Some roles in audit. There's an auditee. What is an auditee? Auditee is an organization which is being audited. There is an audit team. What is an audit team? One or more auditors conducting an audit, supported if needed by technical expert. Who is a technical expert? Technical expert is a person who provides specific knowledge or expertise to the audit team. A specific knowledge or expertise is that which relates to the organization, the process, or the activity to be audited, or the language, or the culture. So, for example, if you're doing an audit, maybe in France or something like that, and you don't know French, then you will probably have a technical expert who is going to help you in translating the language. So that would be a technical expert. A technical expert does not act as an auditor in the audit team. So please note that the technical expert is just to help you and not perform an audit. Observer. Well, who's an observer? Observer is a person who accompanies the audit team but does not audit. So just like a technical expert, he does not perform an audit, but an observer does not also help you. He will just observe the audit. I mean, why do you need an observer? Sometimes an observer could be learning. Sometimes an observer could be assessing you. So if a certifying body also need to go through certification, as in they also need to go through basically they also need to confirm that okay, they are abiding by their rules and regulations. So ISO body will send somebody to observe and see if they are doing the audit properly. So that could be observer as well, who is assessing the auditors. An observer is not a part of the audit team and does not influence or interfere with the conduct of audit. An observer can be from the auditee side, a regulatory side, or other interested party who wants to witness the audit. A guide. Guide is nothing but a person appointed by the auditee to assist the audit team. So if you are performing an audit at if it is a third-party audit, for example, and you don't know the entity, then you probably need to have somebody who would need to guide you in terms of what is located where, who to meet, how to meet, etc. So that would be the guide, and generally the guide is appointed by the auditee. Auditor. Finally, who's auditor? Auditor, I'm sure, are your auditors. The person with the competence to conduct an audit is an auditor. So now that we are aware of some of the terms and definitions of the audit, let's go back to the ISO 19011, because the topic of today's discussion or webinar is basically performing the audit in light of these ISO 19011 auditing principles. So what are the auditing principles? First of all, it is mentioned that adherence to these principles is prerequisite for providing audit conclusions that are relevant and sufficient, and for enabling auditors working independently for one another to reach similar conclusion in similar circumstances. So if there are two auditors who are performing audit, same type of audits in two different locations with similar circumstances, then the auditing principle says that they should be performing this audit and their outcome or conclusion should be very similar, and there should be consistency. So what are those principles? First one is ethical conduct, which is foundation of professionalism. There should be trust, there should be integrity, there should be confidentiality, discretion, which are essential to perform audit. The second one is fair presentation, that is the obligation to report truthfully and accurately. So audit findings, audit conclusions, and audit reports should reflect truthfully and accurately the audit activities. Significant obstacles encountered during the audit and unresolved diverging opinions between the auditee and the auditee need to be reported as well. The third one is due professional care. That is the application of diligence and judgment in auditing. The auditors exercise care in accordance with the importance of the task they perform and the confidence placed in them by the audit clients and other interested parties. Having the necessary competence is an important factor. We will look at the competence part of it maybe a little later as well. The ISO 19011 auditing principle number 4 is independence, the basis for the impartiality of the audit and objectivity of the audit conclusion. Which is, auditors are independent of the activity which is being performed, which is being audited, and are free from bias and conflict of interest. Auditors maintain an objective state of mind through the audit process to ensure that the audit findings and conclusions will be based only on audit evidences. So basically, if I am involved in a particular process and I need to do an audit on that particular process, there is always going to be some kind of conflict of interest or some kind of bias towards the process, because that's a process which I have put in place. So it's better that the auditor is independent of the activity which is actually being audited, so that he's free from bias and conflict of interest. The fifth one is evidence-based approach, the rational method for reaching reliable and or reproducible audit conclusions in a systematic audit process. So audit evidence is verifiable. It is based on samples of information available. Since an audit is conducted during a finite period of time and with finite resources, the appropriate use of sampling is closely related to the confidence that can be placed in the audit conclusion. So we will talk about the sampling bit also a little later stage. So these are 5 auditing principles. Let's look at some examples when I was talking to you about competency part. This is an example of an illustrative example of domain-specific knowledge or competence an auditor should have. It says the auditor should have knowledge in terms of the processes, science and technology underlying resilience, security, preparedness, responses, continuity, and recovery. The auditor should also know methods of intelligence gathering and monitoring. The auditor should know how managing risk of disruptive events happen, which is in terms of anticipating it, avoiding it, preventing it, mitigating it, responding to it, and recovering from disruptive incidents, the return to normalcy part of it. The auditor should also know how the risk management assessment is performed or is done. So you should know how the risk is identified, analyzed, evaluated, and impact analysis in terms of human, physical, intangible assets, as well as environment is done. That's a business impact analysis. How is the risk treated? That adaptive, proactive, and reactive measures, methods, and practices for incident mitigation, responses, and crisis management, methods and practices for continuity, emergency, and recovery management, methods and practices for monitoring, measuring, and reporting of performance, including exercises and testing methodology. So basically, if you look at these, the entire ISO 22301 is covered in these few points. So here you will be checking your risk assessment, you'll be checking your context of organization, you'll be checking the testing which is done, you'll be checking your risk, business impact analysis, the business continuity strategies which are put in place, the communication plan, the incident management plan. You will also be checking how the notification happens. You will see what is the incident log. You will see the continued improvement. You will see the testing. You will see the training, etc., etc., etc. Next one is guidance for auditors for planning and conducting audits. Some of the guidances, what we'll see as far as ISO 19011 is concerned. So applying audit methods, there are a couple of audit methods which the auditor can apply. An audit can be performed using a range of audit methods. Example of audit methods that can be used singly or in combination. So if you look at the table, we have an on-site audit or remote audit. This against the human interaction and the extent of human interaction and non-human interaction, I mean no human interaction basically. So if you're performing an on-site audit with human interaction, you'll probably conduct interviews, you'll probably be completing checklists and questionnaires with auditee participation, conducting document review with auditee participation, and you will also be looking at the sampling part of it. If you're doing a remote ones with the human interaction, you will probably do the same thing via interactive communication means. You will conduct interviews, you will complete checklists and questionnaires, but over interactive communication means you'll be conducting document reviews with the auditee participation. So you will probably not be able to do an actual audit when you're, when I say actual on-site audit, you'll not be able to see the evidences, but you will probably be able to check the documents which the auditee has shared with you as the samples or as the audit evidences. No human interaction, conducting document review, example or records, data analysis, etc., observation of work performed, conducting on-site visit, completing checklists, samplings, that is with respect to products. When you're doing the same thing remotely, then you conduct document reviews, observe work performed via surveillance means, considering social and legal requirements, as well as analysis of data. Please remember, on-site audit activities are performed at the location at the auditee's place. Remote audit activities are performed at the place other than the location of the auditee, regardless of distance, basically. Interactive audit activities involve interaction between the auditee personnel and the audit team. Non-interactive auditee activities involve no human interaction with person representing the auditee, but do involve interaction with equipment, facility, and documentation. There will be some interaction, but there will be minimal human interaction. Now let's look at conducting document review. How do we perform document review? The auditor should consider if the information in the document provided is complete, all aspects of content is contained in the document, whether the document is correct, that is, the content conforms to other reliable sources such as standards and regulations. That is, if you're doing an ISO 22301 audit, then whether the document is in compliance to the ISO 22301 standards. It's consistent, the document is consistent in itself with related documents. And the document is current, the content is up to date, as in it is updated if the document is updated or not. The other ones what you'll be looking at is when you're doing document review, is the documents being reviewed covers the audit scope and provides sufficient information to support the audit objectives. The use of information and communication technologies depending on the audit methods promotes efficient conduct of audits. Note, the document review can give an indication of the effectiveness of the document control within the auditee's management system. So if you're performing an audit, a document review, you will probably get an indication of how effective the management system is implemented in the auditee's environment. Sampling methods, as I mentioned earlier, we'll probably look at sampling methods. So this is what the 19,011 guidelines talk about as far as sampling is concerned. Audit sampling takes place when it is not practical or cost effective to examine all available information during an audit. The objective of audit sampling is to provide information to the auditor to have confidence that the audit objective can or will be achieved. The risk associated with sampling is that the samples may not represent the entire population for which they are selected, and thus the auditor's conclusion may be biased and be different to that which would be reached if the whole population was examined. There may be other risks depending on the variability within the population to be sampled and the methods chosen. So this is something which you would need to confirm and need to mention during the audit opening meeting. So when you perform an audit opening meeting, you would need to mention to the auditee saying that the audit will be performed as sample based, and this is the underlying risk, which means that the sample could be something which might give us a non-conformity, something which might not give the complete non-conformity. So that means it does not mean that the risk is always there that if you check the entire sample, if you check the entire basically if you check the entire population, and the outcome could be slightly different if you're just doing a sample-based audit. So this is something which you need to mention to the auditees when you are about to start the audit. There's some more items as far as sampling is concerned. Our audit samples typically involves the following steps. That's establish the objective of the sample plan, select the extent and composition of the population to be sampled, selecting a sampling method, determining the sample size to be taken, conducting the sampling activity, and compiling, evaluating, and reporting the documenting results. Audits can either be judgment-based. The samples can be done based on judgment or based on statistical sampling. So what is judgment-based sampling? Judgment-based sampling relies on the knowledge, skills, and experience of the audit team. So for judgment-based sampling, the following can be considered, which is previous audit experience within the audit scope, complexity of the requirements, including legal requirements, to achieve the objective of the audit, complexity and interaction of the organization processes and management system elements, degree of change in technology, human factor, or management systems, previously identified key risk areas and areas of improvement, output from monitoring of management system. So basically what it's saying is that an auditor, basically if has already done audit for a particular auditee and probably going for a surveillance audit this time or recertification audit this time. So the auditor or audit team knows the auditee quite well. So they know how they have been performing. So they can do a judgment-based sampling based on their previous experience with the audit. They can also do judgment-based or based on the kind of interaction the organization they had with the organization. The kind of changes the organization might have gone through. So if there's a major change the organization has gone through, then your sample size would probably be higher as compared. If there is no change as compared to what if there is no change the organization has gone through, and so on and so forth. Or you might have, the auditor might have noticed last time that the auditee is in fully compliance, so there is very little non-conformity or observation, which were the outcome of the previous audit. So probably this time also they will be better. So the sample size might reduce a bit, so on and so forth. So the drawback of the judgment-based sampling is that there can be no statistical estimate of uncertainty in the finding of the audit and the conclusion reached. So this is one type of sampling. There is another type of sampling which is statistical-based sampling. A statistical-based sampling is the key element that, the key elements that will affect the audit sampling plan are the size of the organization, the number of competent auditors, the frequency of the audits during the year, the time of individual audit, any external requirement, required confidence level. So basically, you can identify the size of the organization, and if there are 100 people, for example, you can say that, okay, I want to do a sample of 20%, which is 20 people. You can also look at, okay, the audit team has 2 people, so 20 could be a manageable one. Or you can say that just one person is there, so I don't want to do 20, I just want to do 10%, I just want to do 5%. So this is statistical based sampling. So what happens here is when a statistical sampling plan is developed, the level of sampling risk that auditor is willing to accept is an important consideration. This is often referred to as the acceptable confidence level. So for example, a sampling risk of 5% corresponds to an acceptable confidence level of 95%. So if I'm saying that I'm going to take 5% as sample, I'm basically saying that I am confident, 95% confident on the organization that they will be compliant. So a sample risk of 5% means the auditor is willing to accept the risk that 5 out of 100 or 1 in 20 or the sample examined will not reflect the actual value that would be seen if the entire population was examined. So I am confident of 95%. I'm 95% confident on the organization that they will be compliant. 5% is something which we need to check. So my sample would be 5%. So this is called as statistical based sampling. Let's move on. How do you select source of information to check? The source of information selected may vary according to the scope and complexity of the audit and may include the following. So interviews is one source of information, interviews with employees and other people, observations which you will perform of the activities and surrounding work environment and condition. This is your source of information. Documents is another source of information such as policies, objectives, plans, procedures, standards, instructions, licenses and permits, specifications, drawings on the book notice board or on the wall, contracts and orders. So these are other sources of information. Records such as inspection records, minutes of meetings, audit reports, records of monitoring program, and results of measurements. So these are some other sorts of information. Data summaries, analysis, and performance indicators are another source of information. Information of the auditee's sampling plan and on the procedures for the control of sampling and measurement processes. This is another source of information. So if you're going for a third-party audit, you will probably be looking at their internal audit. The auditee themselves might be doing an internal audit. So there you'll probably be looking at their audit report, their sampling, how they're doing samples, etc. Reports from other sources, example, customer feedback, external surveys and minutes, other relevant information from external parties, and supplier ratings. Could be your source of information. Databases and websites is your source of information. Simulation and modeling could be another source of information. So probably you would probably want them to simulate the plan, the continuity plan. So that could be the source of information. The test reports could be your source of information. So you can select the source of information. There are various ones based on 19,011. You can select any of these. Guidance on visiting the auditee's location. To minimize the interference between audit activities and auditee's work process, and to ensure the health and safety of the audit team during a visit, the following needs to be considered. The first part of that is planning the visit. First of all, ensure permission and access to those part of the auditee's location to be visited is in accordance with the audit scope. Provide adequate information, example, briefing, the audit plan, etc., to the auditors on security, health, example, quarantine, occupational health and safety matters, and cultural norms for the visit, including requested and recommended vaccinations and clearances if applicable. Confirm with the auditee that any required personal protective equipment, that's PPE, will be available for the audit team if applicable. Except for unscheduled ad hoc audits, ensure that personnel being visited will be informed about the audit objectives and the scope. So your auditee needs to be aware of your scheduled audits and the plan and the areas you will be visiting, so that they can make proper preparation to ensure that there's no interference, first of all, between the audit activity and actual work which is being performed, and then also to ensure that the health and safety of the audit team is taken care of. Some more guidances in terms of audit side activities. Avoid any unnecessary disturbance of the operational process. Ensure that the audit team is using the personal protective equipment properly. Ensure emergency procedures are communicated. Example, the audit team is aware of where is the emergency exit, assembly points, etc. Schedule communication to minimize disruption. So inform about the plan well in advance. Adapt size of the audit team and the number of guides and observers in accordance with the audit scope in order to avoid interference with the operational process as far as practicable. So ensure that you have minimal audit team, minimal observers, and minimal guides, and they are apt to the kind of scope which you are going to be auditing upon. Do not touch or manipulate any equipment unless explicitly permitted, even when competent or licensed. This is very, very important. You're going to a data center, and if you by mistake remove a wire or something like that, then there could be a huge disruption in the normal business. So ensure that you do not touch any equipment unless explicitly permitted by the auditee, irrespective of what kind of expert an auditor is. If an incident occurs during the on-site visit, the audit team leader should review the situation with the auditee, and if necessary, with the audit client, and or reach agreement on whether the audit should be interrupted, rescheduled, or continued based on the severity of the incident. If taking photographs or video material, ask for authorization from the management in advance, and consider security and confidentiality matter and avoid taking photographs of individual person without their permission, which is again a hygiene factor and a critical a logical factor basically. If taking copies of a document of any kind, ask for permission in advance and consider confidentiality and security matters. When taking notes, avoid collecting personal information unless required by the audit objective or the audit criteria. You can probably take information with respect to the name of the person you're interacting, but don't take the entire biodata of the person. Conducting interviews. Interviews are one of the important means of collecting information and should be carried out in a manner adapted to the situation and the person interviewed, either face-to-face or via other means of communication. However, the auditor should consider the following, which is interviews should be held with persons from appropriate level and functions performing activities or tasks within the audit scope. So if you're performing an audit for IT, you would probably be interviewing the IT person and not an operation person. Yeah, so ensure that he's in the right level and he has the right information of his process. Interviews should normally be conducted during normal working hours and where practical at the normal workplace of the person being interviewed. Attempt to put the person being interviewed at ease prior to and during the interview. Please remember that an auditee would be going through a lot of stress during an audit. So it is very, and if you perform an audit during that situation when the auditee is under stress, you might not get the right information. The auditee might not be able to give you the right information. He might have the information, but he might not be able to give it because of stress. Or he might forget, or he might give wrong information, etc. because of the stress. So it is important that you put the auditee in at ease prior to audit itself. Put him at ease, and during the audit and during the interview, ensure that he is not under any stress. The reason for the audit, for the interview and keynote taking should be explained. So you should probably mention to the interviewer that, okay, I'm going to take some notes, you're going to take your details, you're going to take some observation, and it is a very good practice to also inform the interviewer the notes you've taken. So you probably mentioned that, okay, these are some observations which I have based on the interview, which I would probably checking or check the evidence of these. And if there are evidences which are in compliance, then it is a conformity. If the evidence are not in compliance, then it is a non-conformity. So it's a good thing to, I mean, these are some good practices when you're performing the interviews. So interviews may be initiated by asking the person to describe their work. So start off with a warm handshake or a greeting, and then start off with what is that you do, what is your responsibility, so that makes the person more comfortable, because he will be aware of his process, and he would, any person who is aware of the process would want to talk about it. So that will ensure that there's minimal stress level on the auditee. Careful selection of the type of questions used, example, open-ended question, closed-ended questions, or leading questions. The results from the interview should be summarized and reviewed with the interviewed person. The interviewed person should be thanked for the participation and cooperation. So just don't just walk off after the interview. Please thank the person politely and appreciate the cooperation he is provided. Then, audit findings. Determine the audit findings. When determining audit findings, the following should be considered. Follow-up of previous audit records and conclusions, requirements of audit client, findings exceeding normal practice or opportunities for improvement, sample size, categorization, if any, of the audit findings. Recording conformities. For records of conformity, the following should be considered: identification of audit criteria against which the conformity is shown, audit evidence to support the conformity, and declaration of conformity if applicable. So these are a few things which you need to put in place when you are determining the audit findings. There are some more, which is recording non-conformities. For records of non-conformity, the following should be considered, which is description of or reference to audit criteria. So what is the non-conformity against? So what is the audit criteria against which you have noticed the non-conformity? The non-conformity declaration, if it is available. The audit evidence which you checked, due to which you got to know that there is non-conformity. Related audit findings, if applicable. Dealing with findings related to multiple criteria. During an audit, it is possible to identify findings related to multiple criteria, where an auditor identifies a finding linked to one criteria on the combined audit. The auditor should consider the possible impact of the correspondence or similar criteria of other management systems, depending on the arrangements with the audit client. The auditor may raise either separate finding for each criterion or a single finding combining the reference to multiple criteria, depending on the arrangements with the audit client. The auditor may guide the auditee on how to respond to these findings. So these are a few points which 19,011 talks about, the guidelines talks about. So I hope, I mean, what we have done is we have covered the competency the auditor should have. We've covered how to conduct an audit, what are the things we need to do to ensure that we follow during an on-site audit, what are the different types of audits, how to provide an audit report, what are the standards ISO 22301 standards talk about, what are the 19,011 guidelines and standards talk about. So I think we have covered most part of the auditing principle as far as 19,011 is concerned. So with this, I would like to know if this talk was helpful. So can I request Geeta to start poll number 2? Geeta, can you start poll number 2? So the poll is on. Please let me know if this talk was helpful. Well, thank you very much. I know that this session has been a really heavy loaded session, so we don't have too much of time for questions, but we can still go ahead and utilize the remaining time. I think we have got a few minutes left for questions. So please let us know if you have any questions on the subject we just covered. You can type your questions on the chat box and send it across to us. Please type your questions on the chat box and send it across. Okay, I think we've got a question. How to handle confidential information and data during audit while sharing with auditors? Even after having confidential agreement signed, there could be some confidential information which could not be shared with the auditors. How to handle such situations? Very good question. You're right. There is a non-disclosure agreement which is signed between the auditee and the auditor, the auditing authority, as well as the auditee, the organization. So if you provide information, it is the responsibility of the auditor to ensure that that information is kept strictly confidential and used only for the purpose it is supposed to be used. That's for the audit. If there is some information which is highly confidential, which you cannot share with the auditor, please let the auditor know that this is a very complex, very confidential information. But you can go ahead and show the information and not share the information. You probably take appropriate approvals from your management, and you just show the information to the auditor saying that this is what, if you really want to look at the evidence, this is what it is. It is confidential, so I cannot share the information with you as an evidence. You cannot collect this as an evidence, but you can just see it. You can probably make a note saying that this is the evidence which I checked, but I cannot share the evidence. So generally, the auditors will oblige to it. They will. I mean, everybody understands that there is some very confidential information, like your organization financial information, which you cannot share. So the auditor will definitely understand, and they will oblige to your request, and they will not ask for the evidence, but they will. You can probably just show it in your screen that this is the evidence, and this is something which cannot be shared. So I hope I have answered your question. You can go ahead and share, but show, but not share. Oh, okay. Somebody wants to see the slide of ISO 22301 PDCA cycle. Sorry, just give me a minute. Yeah, so this is how it looks like. Or did you want this slide? The one with the clauses. So this is how the ISO 22301 PDCA cycle looks like. Like I mentioned, the first three clauses are non-actionable clauses. 4, 5, 6, and 7 is plan. 8 is do. 9 is check, and 10 is act. Okay. We've got a request, I guess. I understand that this session is more towards 19,011, but it would be great if requirements related to 22301 are shared. We recently conducted an webinar, which was mainly on ISO 22301. If required, probably we can take your request and conduct a similar session again in the future. But like the topic of the session mentioned, it is related to 19,011. The reason why we were talking about 19,011 is because we assume that the participants are going to be well aware of 22301 and wanting to know more on the auditing principles. The session for 22301 was already conducted some time back. We didn't want the repeat of that, and that's the reason why we want to change. But we can take your request and probably conduct a similar session again in the future. But please let us know if you want to do that, if you want a session on 22301. So I think we've got a couple of more minutes. Okay, we've got another question. Is auditor recommendations, are auditors' recommendation mandatory? Auditors cannot recommend. They will provide conformity, non-conformity, observation, opportunity of improvement, whatever you want to call it as. The standard just has conformity, non-conformity. But if you want to provide observation, you can provide observation. You can provide OFIs, that's opportunity for improvement. You can go ahead and provide the opportunity for improvement. But an auditor cannot provide recommendations. This would probably be a conflict of interest. Unless it is an internal audit. If you are performing an internal audit and you know the organization very well, you want to improve the process, so you want to provide recommendations, then you can go ahead and do so, but this is not applicable for a third-party audit. In a third-party or certification audit, you cannot, auditors generally do not provide recommendations. They will provide you the observations, non-conformities. It is up to the organization or the auditee to use those observations and non-conformities to improve the process based on the knowledge what they have as far as their organization is concerned. So, hope I have answered your question. Any other questions? I think it's almost time. If you have any questions, you can please let me know. This is my email address, zubair.a@continuityandresilience.com. So if you have any further questions on this topic, you can go ahead and let me know your questions anytime in the future as well. All right, so we've got a comment. Thank you for the good samples of the audit information. Right, thank you. I hope it was helpful. So I think we can conclude now. It's, oh, sorry, we've got one more question. Who should do risk-based audit and systems audit? Okay, so this is, I'm sorry, I didn't understand your questions. Probably you're checking who is the certifying body who needs to do risk-based audit and who is the certifying body who is well-versed in system-based audit. I'm sorry, I don't know, I don't understand the question, but the expertise, any certifying body who is authorized by ISO can perform an audit on the particular topic, on the management systems. However, if the certifying body does not have the right expertise, then they can always use the help of technical expert. So if an organization needs to go to an certifying body for an audit, for a certification audit, and want to find out who is the right person to do a system-based audit or risk-based audit, you can probably do your research and identify who's an expert. I think almost all certifying bodies have expertise in risk-based, system-based, financial, etc., etc. So you can probably identify the certifying body based on your requirement. Okay, another question coming up. Do you recommend or suggest who should be among auditors competent to perform the above audit? Do you recommend or suggest who should be among auditors competent to perform the above audit? If you go through 19,011, there are illustrative examples of the competence which is required for each of the audits. So for continuity-related audits, I have showed you the illustrative examples. For information security audits, there are some illustrative examples. For financial audits, risk-based audits, there are illustrative examples which are mentioned in 19,011. So for this, you would probably need to refer to your 19,011 guidelines. Okay, in comments, thank you, Zubair, good luck. Thank you. Well, I guess we are running out of time, so I would like to thank you all for making this session a successful one. We always mention that this is a free webinar, but it is made successful by your participation. So thank you for your participation and making this successful. Thank you, Zubair, for such a helpful session. So thank you. I think with this we can conclude. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions in the future, like I mentioned, you have my email address. You can touch base with me and we can probably discuss or clarify your questions or concerns. But thank you.